Hey, love to see everybody on a Friday afternoon. This is going to be wonderful. We're going to shake some things up today. We're talking about disruption in healthcare leadership. And I can think of no other person to bring to the stage right now when we're talking about disruption than Dr. Andrea Clark. How are you doing, Dr. Clark?
I am well. How are you, Grant? Thank you so much for another insightful conversation today. I'm really looking forward to just discussing how to become a disruptor in leadership.
Yeah, I think this is important for all of us
Mm.
to take a look because there's a lot of disruption that takes place. Some of the things we know are coming, some things we don't, whether it's new leadership, new teams, new boards, there's mergers, there's acquisitions, there's a lot that we can talk about. And we want to have these discussions because they don't always happen out loud. And so we want to talk about these things. I want to know this first question.
Mm.
And I got this from coming out of our last session,
Okay.
but it is relevant today. And so they want to know, can you share a defining moment when you challenged the norm in healthcare leadership?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think as you ascend in your leadership journey, we will all have those moments that we can look back and say, I really challenged this probably traditional methodology in leadership, and it kind of worked out in your favor. Sometimes you have pitfalls where it doesn't always work out in your favor, but at least you tried, right? So when I think of a specific time of when I challenged leadership, and challenges are always bad. I like to say challenges are oftentimes opportunities with work clothes on, right? So a time that I specifically challenged leadership was a time that I worked at Mayo Clinic, right? As you know, I was spearheading a national department that had never been created in the Mayo Clinic organization. However, in order to really execute our objectives, our goals, and really create more client vendor relationships and partnerships across the nation, I had to shake up the status quo, right? I had to think outside of those 150 plus years of Mayo traditional leadership, and I had to bring in new innovative ideas. For example, I had to take on new challenges, right? And I had to starting something new like a national reference laboratory department for Mayo Clinic. I didn't have any type of predecessor to, follow behind. So as a result, I had to take challenges as they come. Right. Mm-hmm. So I had to move quickly. I had to adapt quickly in that. And I had to build systems, teams, and SOPs as the challenges presented themselves in real time. And then not only that, whenever you are a disruptor and you're taking on those challenges with a more innovative and agile approach and building that infrastructure around, then you want to do a predictive analysis, right? On, okay, this obstacle came, but now what obstacle could possibly derive from that, right? So then you want to create preventative systems on top of that. And typically all of that is kind of tossed at you all at once, right? So you definitely have to have a team of individuals that's just as open, just as agile, and they're not trying to fit you in that traditional trajectory of a leadership style, especially when we were building a new national laboratory department at Mayo Clinic. I definitely had to be a disruptor.
That's important. What I took from that is like you got to hit the ground running, and when you're new, there's no history that you really have to disrupt of itself other than your own. Mm-hmm. And then, just kind of bring in your way of doing things. I see that a lot, but then there's existing systems in place that may or may not need to be changed. Mm-hmm. Now, here's the big question. And I waited for this one because this one I thought was like, wow, I'm going to wait till we're like 5 minutes into this before I go on to this one. But it's a great question. It says, why is there an urgent need for strong healthcare leadership today? What's that all about?
Well, that's a very loaded question, right? Look at what's all the changes that's going on around us, right? Because we have so many challenges, which could be new opportunities that we are facing simultaneously, right? So we have to be very succinct when it comes to our leadership more than ever, and very intentional of our leadership style so we can get the desired outcomes. So when you say what are some urgent needs of that, and when I talk about how the importance of this very precise leadership needs to be, and definitely in today's climate, because think about all the things that we're facing simultaneously. We have our burnout, shortages. Over 58% of health systems executives expect workforce challenges such as talent shortages, retention issues, and things of high turnover rate that we're facing now. And then with all of that, we also have the digital integration that's ever going in our healthcare systems now. And so not only do we have to be as agile as possible to those new technologies, then we have to make sure that we are making sure that we are being as profitable and efficient with the technologies, and making sure they're actually doing and providing the service that they've pitched to us, in those high executive meetings, to make sure we're not as wasteful. And then, of course, with the rising expectations of patient demand, so we want to look at the affordability, accessible, high quality care, because we always know that we want to, throughout all of this, keep a patient-centered focus. And then, of course, last but not least, we want to look at those financial pressures. Look at the political and government climate that we're navigating now as a healthcare unit, right? So due to the climate, there are a whole nother plethora of financial obstacles that we have to be more creative and innovative of. And most of all, with funding low and the financial aspects, we have to be as resourceful as possible, taking a little bit how to maximize, optimize that, and really do our due diligence in hitting all the benchmarks.
Today, you nailed it. Today is an unprecedented time. We just have so many things happening simultaneously. And if we really think about it, we're coming off of COVID, and we're just getting really acclimated to another new playing field, especially in the healthcare world that was taxed so much. And it revealed a lot in our systems and the things that we need to do, things we can augment, things we can't. You got new technology that's just all over the place, and people trying to figure out, where do I fit in into all this change? How can I lead through turbulent waters or even unknown areas that what used to be, I knew where I sat, I had solid ground. It's so important. I'm glad you brought these things up. And this is why I believe our upcoming workshop in March that's going to help when it comes to strategies. And the question is, what strategies can we utilize to empower rising leaders to ensure that their voices are heard? Because not only are we talking about what we have in place today with leadership, there's a whole new cohort, let's say, of leaders coming up and taking places that they weren't in before. What strategies would you give to those people?
Well, that's a really good question, Grant. And like you said, it kind of piggybacks over our last question there about the patient care demand that we have in the pipeline, and that we're predicting as we have a growing aging population. We're living longer, and therefore that is putting a lot of stress on our healthcare system, right? So it's very imperative that we nurture our emerging leaders, right? We don't want them running for the hills because they don't feel value seen, or most of all, they don't feel equipped with strategic executive leadership skills to really give them a stake in the game of healthcare and making sure the needs of the patients come first, right? So I would say we want to speak to leaders as they are becoming this, the leadership, whether it's on the clinical side or the non-clinical side. And we want to be mindful of that multi-generational language, right? You have to make sure that you're speaking their language. So for example, when you have a Gen Z generation, they're going to value authenticity, right? So they don't necessarily necessarily take that traditional approach and in retaining this generation. You have to take a different approach. It's no longer just the training them, hire them, and do their job, right? You want to be authentic with them, and you want to make sure that you're having those conversations of where do they see themselves in 3 to 5 years, and then you want to strategically put them on little projects, right, to exercise that muscle, right, train them to where they're going and not necessarily to just what you hired them for. That keeps them engaged, that keeps them stimulated, that keeps them feeling as valuable as possible, and most of all seen.
So I'm trying to pull it all together now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm putting myself in the shoes of our emerging leaders.
Mm-hmm.
They're seeing all the change. They see what's going on. And we didn't even talk about a lot of the so-called baby boomers. I'll tap myself on the back on that one. Mm-hmm. And our Gen Xers and that kind of thing. They're starting to retire, or they will be retiring. That is causing either a leadership vacuum, or we have emerging leaders that want to take on more responsibility and accountability, but they often struggle to be included in the executive decision making of today. So how are they going to get the experience, right? How are they going to get the exposure? Give us some insight in that area.
I would say, how to give them that. And I love what you said, that generational piece. I think that's really where, as I was a national executive, where I thrived, right? My boss was a boomer. I'm a millennial, and then my team was like that rising Gen X. So I was like the liaison, communicating between when he came too hard. I kind of buffered that in the middle and then was able to translate that over to my Gen Z team, right? So it was just a perfect a team right there. But like you said, how do we create pathways, right? Because that's essentially what you want to do. And that's what we're doing with Lead with Impact. This is a leadership pathway where we know that, like you said, budgets are low and a lot of things are moving when it comes to healthcare, with leadership and operations, logistics, patient-centered focus, and the digital era as well. So we have a lot of moving parts. So it's good to tap into leadership pipeline programs such as Upskill, because we basically come in as your support system to put these emerging professionals at the table sooner rather than later. Now, why is that important? When no longer, like I said, we have to be disruptors of this traditional leadership style, right? Mm-hmm. We can't necessarily wait until our emerging leaders are mid-level and now you get invited to the table, right? Because now by the time that our emerging professionals have paid their dues and reached the mid-level, they're burnt out, they're no longer interested, or they're career jumpers, right? Or organizational jumpers, and they've already put their focus somewhere else. So giving them visibility to these high-stake conversations, like what we do with Lead with Impact, and really teaching them those business acumen, the strategic thinking acumen, is something we can do to capture and retain our top talent.
So this leads me into the next question, because I love how you frame that discussion specifically, especially our emerging leaders, so they're listening to this, how they can be a part of the executive decision-making model. And you've got to get trained. You've got to get exposure to the types of issues that are at hand. And how do you utilize your skill sets? What are the tool sets that are available? And then ultimately that mindset, so if you look at, what your emotional IQ is, you really don't know that until you're pressured. And then you really see how these things come about. So I love the simulation that we're doing in Lead with Impact. And this leads me to something I have learned, that organizations, they create culture, but they don't always have the values that they need. And I'm talking about even the budgets they need, the money they need when they identify early leadership programs or pipeline management. And a lot of times those are the first things to go away, which is not great when you think about it. Like, the leadership of tomorrow, there's no bench. You have no one there. And then you have high turnover and you got people that are leaving the business and you never know when. and you haven't, your leadership bench is low. So
Yeah.
the question is, how can organizations create a culture that values early leadership engagement?
That's a great question. I'm going to break that down in two parts, I think. So we have our traditional side, but this conversation is talking about how to be disruptors. And when we talk about disruption, we're talking about thinking outside the box, right? Doing something new to meet the needs of the emerging leaders or our professionals today. So on a more traditional side, we are still want to maintain our mentorship programs that we have with them, sponsorship programs. We talk about that a lot with Upskill, the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. A mentor is someone that gives you their advice from their years of expertise and knowledge, but a sponsor is someone that advocates, right? They use their voice for you. They advocate for you. They pick up the phone and say, "Hey, John Doe is the perfect person for the job." So you need a healthy balance of both a mentor and a sponsor. And as organizations, we need to ask ourselves, how can we be more of a sponsor, right? How can we really nurture these emerging professionals with their growth so they can bring more decision-making ideas to the table, right? I love what you said earlier. Leadership isn't in a vacuum. Sometimes when we're bringing the younger or emerging leaders to the table, they can get nasty looks, right? Like, oh, you haven't paid your dues yet. You haven't, what are you doing here? But this is that disruptive mindset that we need to take. We need to have a more welcoming approach to the table, right? And that's what I love with Lead with Impact, because we have our directors and mid-levels, and then we have those new emerging professionals coming to the table so we can all put our ideas together. Everyone can be heard so we can create something new that's required for the health and patient outcomes that we're all serving overall.
Man, and I'm hoping that, when I say emerging leaders, people are coming out of program now, and then all the different MBA, PhDs. There are different colleges and universities, especially here in South Florida. And we have a number of them that will be in attendance, whether at the FIU, FAU, University of Miami, Barry, Florida Memorial, Atlantic University, Nova, Southeastern University. I mean, these are great. We want to give them these opportunities because what we found is this, that emerging leaders, because they have a lot of book knowledge, let's just say. They have some technical skills, but can they develop strategic thinking beyond clinical expertise?
Exactly.
Is something that, because there's a difference between technical leadership. You're very, very good at what you do. But when it comes to the leadership of people and processes, it's a different animal. And it's a different way of looking. And you don't necessarily get that kind of training in the college setting. It's almost OJT for the most part. But there are training programs like what Upskill does, that you have to let, what, I've got to start investing in myself to get the training and knowledge that I need to compete and to add value at that level. So important. So I want to ask you, as someone who's been in these trenches, who worked at very large organizations, have seen what happens at these tables, how can these emerging leaders develop strategic thinking beyond clinical expertise?
Well, that's really good. And as you know, my background is really more of the hard sciences, scientific research, laboratory medicine, things of that nature. And then pivoting over into that more executive, operational, and leadership, and now in public health and navigating in those spaces. You're correctly right. The book and theory knowledge can only take me so far, right? But how, like you said, with your emotional intelligence, or even your business acumen, right? What I realize, what is going to make you as competitive as possible, and this is for even emerging leaders that's trying to break through the glass ceiling, get their foot in the door, or just be seen as the leader that you know that you are. You have to take an interdisciplinary approach with your career, right? Like you said, it's not just about how smart you are on the clinical side or the technical side or the technology side, right? You have to learn the language of business, right? And that's what we do at Lead with Impact. We teach you the language of leadership. And what the language of leadership is very multifaceted. You have your business acumen, right? You have that financial piece from our CFO, who was a top executive at Orlando Health, Latasha Barnes. So she's coming in to teach you that. So you're going to be a multilinguistic professional, right? So you're going to have the financial acumen, the operational language as well, that strategic and visionary and growth strategy, the executive presence, right? So you see how this is all an interdisciplinary approach to your leadership style, right? Because you never know what levers are going to be needed from you to pull as you ascend as a leader. So with Lead with Impact, that's exactly what we're doing. We're equipping you on so many different levels so you can be as agile, right, and as prepared as possible to use this program as a springboard of visibility. So you don't have to wait for the next promotion. You are promoting yourself by coming to our Lead with Impact, sitting at the table and stretching yourself, challenging yourself on looking at projections, ROIs, strategic growth strategies, and things of that nature so you can speak the language of leadership.
Now, that was great how you put it together, that why you need to do this from a Lead with Impact. Listening to programs like we're having now, so you begin to really do self-assessment. Take a real good self-assessment, take a real good look in your own mirror, and ask yourself the very candid question: where do I want to be in the next 12 to 18 months? And can I achieve what my goal is in that amount of time with the skills I have, the tools that I have, and how I see things? And if the answer to that is yes, I can, oh, more power to you. But I would question that, because most of the time you are going to be deficient in certain areas. You're going to be strong in certain areas. But if you don't do a self-assessment of what those strengths, weaknesses are, as Dr. Clark just said, those opportunities or the threats are really big. And usually the threats could be internal, because you got to take the blinders off sometimes, take a look at truly where you sit. How do you see yourself? And how do others see you? Do they see you as leadership material?
Correct.
And if they do or they don't, what do they see? And why do they see that? And what are you projecting into that framework? It's completely up to you. I want to ask you this. What advice do you have for professionals who want to be disruptors, but fear pushback?
Okay. Yeah. So, as I said, with my own personal journey of being a disruptor in the field, I didn't know I was a disruptor. I just had, a lot of vision. I always see how we can optimize and make this better. And then I always advocate for that. I always put voice to reason behind that. I don't let my ideas just fester. I don't just assume that someone's thinking the same thing. No, I'm going to let you know exactly where I see the potential of this organization, this department going, and then just let leadership come into alignment with that. But for those that are wanting to be game changers, disruptors, innovators, right? Way makers, as I say, in the healthcare industry, you have to welcome pushback, right? Pushback isn't necessarily a negative thing, right? Every time I receive pushback, that actually built up more muscle in me. It made me stronger. It made me more determined. It made me kind of fact check myself a little bit more. It made me be more detail oriented, right? So for professionals that's going and ascending in their role in leadership, and especially with me, because I was based in Washington, D.C. So now Mayo Clinic in Rochester is building a brand new department And it's a lot of people at that time at the table that had already been with Mayo for 20 plus years, right? Thinking they're going to be in that next executive role. And then here they come, fly me in. I'm like early 30s and I'm sitting at the table. So everybody's looking like, who are you and how did you get here? So I received a lot of pushback, right? But thankfully, I trusted in myself. I invested ongoingly in myself. I didn't only wait for the next training program with Mayo or any other organizations. I signed up. I invested in myself so I could always, like you said, identify blind spots before it was more costly. So to emerging professionals, I want you to look at pushback as not necessarily a negative, but actually a tool to allow you to dig deeper, right? To allow you to be more efficient and more, I guess you could say, more determined to make sure that your vision can happen. So welcome pushback because it's there to just really tighten up your game as you're moving forward as a leader.
I could have said it better. That's exactly what's going on. And for my sports fans, that we are on the eve of Super Bowl weekend, when you take the field and you have your playbook, right, and you're going to run your offense to achieve your goal, there's someone on the other side of the ball.
Yeah.
There's somebody on the other side of the ball. And it's not always, it could be internal, right? Internal team. It could be external, right? And it could be something completely out of your control.
Yeah.
But there's always factors that come up that can throw you off your game. And then you have to realize, is my goal big enough? Do I have what it takes to achieve what I have set out to do? Yeah. And it's easy to say, and I tell you, because I have a lot of clients, and I always start out with this, you're going to need 3 things to achieve this particular goal that we have framed together. And they say, what's that? Well, number 1, you're going to need a guide. Not too many people are going to be able to get to where you want to go in the time frame you want to go without someone that has already been there helping you along the way. You need a guide. You also need a framework. That's the methodology. That's the math. That is the map that we're going to follow in order to achieve your goal. Right. And that third thing, the first 2 I can help you with, or Dr. Clark can help you with. That's why we're doing Lead with Impact. But the third thing is the will. You've got to have the will. You've got to have the grit. When you do get the pushback, you do get knocked down. You don't make that first down. There's a fumble. There's an interception. There's always something happens. But you know what? The teams that win, they push forward. That's what makes the game interesting, right? You always think, oh my God, they're about to lose the game, and then somehow they pull it out at the end. That's because they continue to execute. They continue to execute on their plan, on their vision. They can see it in front of them. There's 2 teams right now that are going to compete to their ultimate goal of getting that Super Bowl, and they're going to compete, very heavily to get there. Someone else wants your leadership position that you have charted for yourself. Someone else wants that. I know this VP role is going to come open. I know this director role is going to come open. I know the C-suite role is going to come open. But are you prepared to meet the moment? And this is why we're having these continuous conversations around that. Before we go, and we're getting toward the end of our talk today, give us some insight about why you feel Lead with Impact is going to be the way to go for you.
Well, as I said, we're in a hypersensitive climate right now. You cannot afford to just only lean on your degree whenever you're in such a competitive market. You have an MHA, or you may have a master's in science, or even a doctorate, but what's next? I love your analogy with the sports analogy. What's the game plan, right? And you don't stop asking yourself what the game plan is once you walk across the stage, or even once you land a job in an organization. Because I say this to my son all the time, somebody is always ready to take your spot, right? Mm-hmm. So any position that you foresee yourself in, someone is visualizing their self in that position, right? So it's up to you to invest in yourself, because when we get the pay raise and we get the promotions, that's a new investment that the company is making within you, right? So as we know, as business founders and CEOs, the more I invest in my business, the more return I get on my investment, right? So we always say with Lead with Impact, you are in the business of you, right? So making the investment to say, you know what, I'm ready for the high stakes conversation with interdisciplinary professionals. I'm ready to take my seat at the C-suite, right? I always say you're a CEO before you actually become a CEO, right? So
Sure.
you're already with this Lead with Impact, you're already at the C-suites, right? It's just a matter of time before you materialize that actual promotion. Investing in yourself, you'll never go wrong with investing in yourself. You never know the relationships you'll meet at this conference that we're having. You never know the blind spots that you may identify with yourself. And you may never know how much this is going to be a real game changer in your next leadership position. But you have to take that first step before anyone else can invest in you. The Lead with Impact is giving you an opportunity to believe, right, and invest in yourself so you can go to the next level.
Couldn't have said it better. I hope someone is listening to that, taking it to heart, because that's real talk. It's real talk, real truth. Before we get off of here, Andra, you've got to tell them how they can sign up for Lead with Impact.
Okay, yeah. So we have multiple ways to sign up. I mean, of course, on my LinkedIn profile, I always have a lot of posts coming up, grants, LinkedIn posts out as well. But at upskill.edu/events, takes you right to the ticket page. You can learn more about our Lead with Impact, what you will really gain from the conference, our high-level world-renowned speakers that's coming in, our chef, executive testing with wine and food pairing, and you will be able to purchase a ticket. We also have a flexible payment plan that you can take advantage of, so you can securely secure your seat at the round table. So upskill.edu/events is a way for you to go ahead and grab your ticket and join us at Miami-Dade College.
Sounds great to me. We'll be back here next Friday as well at 3 p.m. with another topic that you're sure to enjoy. Thank you so much for joining us today this Friday. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.